Today's interview is with Corey Oliver. Corey used to be an NBA agent, believe it or not, so that was really interesting to talk about that. Corey talks about how they go into some of the worst areas in Chicago and they try and create naturally occurring affordable housing. So really interesting to hear their approach and how they go around it. So if you're interested to hear more about affordable housing and how they're able to go to some of the worst areas in Chicago, stick around for today's interview. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review if you think it's worthy. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate and you want to talk some more, if you want a sounding board, if you want someone to try and help you, I'm here to have that conversation with you. So there's going to be a link in the description down below. Please sign up there, or go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com, the website, and there'll be a link there as well so you can sign up. So I'd love to get to know more about you, see if there's any way whatsoever I can help you. But before that, stick around for today's great interview with Corey Oliver. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we have Corey Oliver with us. Hey, Corey, what's going on, man?
Oh, hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. As I was saying right before we got on this call, you got your jacket on, so I'm guessing it's a little cold in Chicago right now.
Here we go. It's starting to get there. We were fortunate enough where the cold really didn't start kicking in until the end of September, so we think it's going to be a brutal one this year.
Okay. How soon will you guys get snow? Next month?
Oh, man. Well, we probably start getting snow in November, but it gets pretty cold here towards the end of October, and it'll get real cold. We're in what's called heat season already in Chicago. So there's a city ordinance that requires landlords to have their heat on by September 15th. Otherwise, you can end up in heat court.
I've never heat court. Okay, that's crazy. Yeah, we definitely don't have that here in Vegas. I felt bad. I was complaining before I realized where you were from. I was complaining that it's going to get in the 60s in a couple of months here, and you were just laughing at me because I said,
"Yeah, we're at 40, it was like 45 today." So that's pretty exciting, and that's still pretty mild. That's still a pretty mild day for us right now. So once that wind hits you in the cold, it changes everything.
Right, Chicago's the windy city, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's us.
So before we kind of get into more of the fun conversation we're going to have, I'm sure, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what your focus is right now?
Sure. So coming out of school, I got my MBA back in 2006. I knew I was actually a D1 volleyball player. So I played volleyball in college.
Okay, volleyball, yeah.
Yeah. So I came out, I started coaching a little bit coming out of college, and then I ended up getting licensed to do NBA sports agency. So I worked with John Spencer at 540 Sports, and I was doing a lot of his overseas stuff. And so he would handle our NBA clients, and I would get to work with them on those. And then I would also deal with like a lot of our placement overseas and things like that. And so like I placed players in Greece and Spain, Israel, ironically enough, into the UK. We placed players into the UK as well. And so I did that for, I don't know, about 5 or 7 years. I still kind of work with players every now and again as I, if I can help out. And then my family started real estate back in 2002. So when I was in my undergrad, my dad transitioned out of the nonprofit sector into real estate. And so I helped him do his business plan, and we started off flipping. And so he was buying and rehabbing and turning homes here on the south side of Chicago while I was finishing my undergrad. And in 2005, we became a part of a HUD program in Chicago called North Mondale Restoration, where we were tasked with other developers to capitalize this neighborhood. And so we bought our first 18-unit building at the time over in that neighborhood, and we bought it. We did a $1.2 million renovation. And then we ended up buying a bundle of 2 and 3 flats. That was a total of 11 units. So it was 4 2 flats and a 3 flat. And then we ended up getting a 17 unit and a 9 unit. And then we had some smaller stuff on the south side, a 4 unit, 2 unit, things like that. And so, I mean, after I got done with the sport, I just kind of transitioned back, and we just kind of jumped in and kept on pushing. And so since then, we've acquired a 12 unit and a 20 unit. And most recently, last June, we are now in a 60 unit development. So we bought a 60 unit building where we're doing a $2 million development on it. And so we're slated to hopefully finish that up here at the end of October. And so we'll be working on stabilization with that. But our focus has been primarily low to moderate income communities. And so we go into some of the toughest neighborhoods in Chicago, and with the effort of trying to stabilize and bring naturally occurring affordable housing. That's what we do.
Very cool. You told me right before the call that you used to be an agent for the NBA. That's a crazy job. How do you go from, you know, being a college volleyball player to being an NBA agent, right? That's kind of a cool job.
You know, when I was in my undergrad, I wanted to be an attorney. And so I knew I wanted to do something in sports at that point. So I wanted to do that. And one of my classes that I took, you know, I mean, often the cliche that we hear is, right, 80% of NFL players and 85% of NBA players within 5 years of retiring are bankrupt, right? So so that was always my driving thing, was I want to get in there. I want to try to be a focus on trying to help these guys create stability and long-lasting wealth with whatever they make, whether they play for 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever their career is. You know, give them the financial education that they need so that they're not wasting their money. What I ended up finding out is a lot of them don't want to hear that. You know, we had a kid, you know, who he was actually playing overseas. He was making he made $600,000, I think, in the season. And by the time he got home in May, by the time he was playing in the summer league in Vegas in July, he needed a $40,000 loan. You know. And he just went and blew through his entire salary for that year, you know. And it was just, and we had tried, and like we had conversations and we would talk, and, you know, and so it just became like almost like a mission of futility. And so my dad had already started getting into real estate. And so even while I was doing the agency stuff and learning about that, you know, I was still dabbling in doing real estate and still learning about what he was doing and being involved and everything like that. And then finally it just got to the point where I was just like, enough is enough. I don't think I'm going to be able to do what I want to do from this particular. And so what I said to myself was, you know, let me figure out and try to master the other side then, right? And which is understanding how to create cash flow and how to create return on investments and run performance and understand how these buildings work and operate and how to make an investment platform out of that. And maybe I can go back to them on the other side of the table and say, hey, here's some deals for you. You know, can we work on this side? And so they don't look at me as an employee or somebody whose job is to go out and get them a job. But now they look at me as somebody who is out here to try to make their money last. And I don't want to be Merrill Lynch. You know, I don't want to be like a financial planner or anything like that. I want to do investments, and I want, you know, real estate to be the catalyst to that. You know, just recently, Robert Covington, who plays for Houston, teamed up with Lou Aldang to create an investment pool with the University of Chicago that they're going to invest. Well, with one of the directors at the University of Chicago to invest in the South Side of Chicago. You know, and so I know that they're out here and they want to do it. You know, they just need somebody that is going to help them, because the reality is not everybody can come into these communities and do what we do, right? I manage, so right now we own about 150 units, and then we manage third party about another 150 units. But we also manage receiverships for the city of Chicago, and we also manage REOs for banks. And there's one particular 20-unit building that we manage that was owned by a group out in California that has now become an REO. And I mean, you're talking about at one point in time at 21 occupied units where there were 0 rent-paying tenants, you know. And so It's both. We deal with like everything that most people read about as far as a bad tenant. We've dealt with it, and the violence that you see in Chicago, that you guys hear about happening in Chicago, oftentimes my guys are around those buildings and we are servicing those buildings, so but the reality is make a lot of money, off of those buildings. We had a building, for example, a 17-unit building over on the west side. Our investors averaged 12% cash on cash return a year for the 5 years that we had it. And then when we sold it, we made enough profit on the sale where their actual return on investment was something like 30%, 32% cash on cash return per year over the 5 years that they held it, and that was in area of Chicago that they call K-Town, which is like super rough, and so, I mean, if you have the fortitude to get into these neighborhoods, create stability and housing for these people, you can do good socially and get your cash on cash, return that you need. Because I would put, like, if you go up to the north side, you might only make 5%, because of the values of the properties up there, so you're only going to do 5%, 6% on your money. But yeah, you don't have to deal with the headaches that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, it's that adage, right? If you can solve a problem, it's usually you can benefit, right? If you can find a way to solve a problem, that's a great way to make a profit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you guys are in, like you said, some of the roughest, toughest areas. How do you guys deal with that, right? Because it's one thing to try and fix up a property and worry about the interior renovations, but it's another thing to have to fear for your safety, right? You and your crew and anyone that's working on that project.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? A lot of it is so. For the properties that we own, like we have one in Englewood, we employed the community, so there were guys that would walk up and ask for jobs, and we'd let them clean up around the building, and we would let them be janitors, and help us clean up. And so we would employ people from the community to empower them to want to protect the building, right? Because they know if we leave, their money stops, and so they would watch the building. And so even though you had all this other stuff going on all around the building, we just had like this nice little force field around our building to make sure our copper didn't get up and walk away, and so, I mean, that has always been a big part of what we do. It's hired from our communities. Our property management company, we've hired from the communities that we service, right? So we pay for them to go get the training that they need to get. We work with our partner to make sure that they get all the tools and all the education that they need from a management standpoint. And then we put them out into the field and we let them manage our properties. And whether it's maintenance or management or what have you, that has been, so one of the things that has worked for us, and so a lot of the guys that we have hired are, they may have a sketchy background from when they were younger, or they may not have all the educational qualifications that, somebody else may have. And then we just invest in them, and then they're empowered to make sure that, our properties are good. But at the same time, they come from these areas, so they know people around, right? So they, a lot of times we can have conversations with people that other people can't have conversations with due to the relationships that are, third, fourth, and sixth part separations, so that we can, kind of squash any of the stuff that's going on, whether it's dealing with gang violence, whether it's dealing with drugs, whether, whatever it is. We try to be active and being part of the problem, or being part of the solvers of the problem, and not letting that impact our tenant population. And so, I mean, it's not always, it's not always easy. For example, we manage a building right now. It's a 48-unit building that's in receivership because the owner has gone through a bankruptcy. And this is kind of one of the things that we were talking about earlier. So we've had two big scandals, I guess, on the south side of Chicago. Equity Build was a south side Ponzi scheme that involved about 1,700 units. And the other one was the Better Housing Foundation, which had about 1,000 units in the city of Chicago. And and they recently just went bankrupt, and they've been selling off their portfolio through bankruptcy auctions and things like that. So we manage part of that Better Housing Foundation on behalf of the city of Chicago and the receivers that were appointed. And this 48-unit building has multiple squatters. And we had a situation where two gang members on opposing gangs moved in, squatting next to each other across the hall. They didn't realize it, and they come out of the apartments and they get into a gunfight with each other because they realize they got rival gangs living across the hall from each other. And so it's crazy, but my guys, they understand, like, look, we have conversations, and honestly now they, one of them I think is left or whatever, so they're not a problem anymore, but those are just, you just deal with it, and you talk with the tenants and you try to keep your tenants safe, and you try to keep we got to work to try to get a new owner in place. So, and once you get a new owner in place, then they're going to invest the money and time to get the building operating and everything like that. Those are the tough ones, right? Like dealing with this stuff and having almost 3,000 units on the south side of Chicago just being taken advantage of and just squeezed for every drop of money they can get, and then just left to the city to just figure out what they're going to do with it. It's tough. It is hard stuff. But I feel like with the support that we've gotten from our partners, and the trust that they've given us to go in there and to stabilize, and we work with the tenants and let them know what's going on, and try to make sure that they have nice, safe living conditions as best as we can for those particular buildings. The tenants have responded well. They're getting the part of the portfolio just sold. So there's 3 portfolios in the Better Housing Foundation stuff. 2 of them have sold to some pretty big name buyers here in the city of Chicago. So we are hopeful that they're going to get stabilized, and we're going to work with them to try to bring stability to these areas and bring opportunity to the tenant population, because that's really what is needed to help get these buildings stabilized and get these communities stabilized. But contrary to what you see on CNN, Chicago really isn't as dangerous as somebody might leave. We have our spots like everybody else, but it's not, outside of the occasional guy riding his horse down the Dan Ryan, we don't have too much craziness going on.
Yeah.
So it's been a really big learning experience for us, going out, because primarily for us up until last year, we only managed our own stuff. And so we had 150, once we bought the 60 unit, we were up to about 150 units of our own stuff, and we just managed inside. And our stuff, even though we were in some of these neighborhoods, we always tried to pick some of the more stable parts of the neighborhood, And so with the receivership stuff and the REO stuff that we manage, you don't really get to pick, and so they say, hey, I need you to come in and I need you to manage here, and you got to do X, Y, and Z. And so we work with our bank partners and, our city partners and the inspectors to make sure that we can try to deliver safe living conditions.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's awesome what you guys are doing. There's not many people that want to necessarily dive in that space and be in that space. And also, truthfully, I don't think many people can be in that space, right? You can't just decide, hey, I'm going to be in this kind of space. You need a certain kind of skill set, which you guys clearly have. And I love how you talk about how you hire people from the community, right? Because it's 2 things. For one, you're giving people from that community a job and, hopefully bettering their life and improving their life. But also, they have an understanding of that area that someone from California coming in to buy that property will never, ever understand, right? Will never,
Absolutely.
So it's genius, really, because it's a benefit for everyone. So I think that's really cool how you guys figured that out. I'd be interested. Why did you and your dad decide when you got into real estate, right? You can write in anything you want. Why did you guys decide to go for, this kind of space, the tougher workforce housing type,
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, so my dad, his background in Chicago, there's a street newspaper called Streetwise. And so when I told you he came from the nonprofit sector, he worked for this, he was the founding executive director of this newspaper. And the purpose of the newspaper was to employ homeless people. So the homeless people would come in, They would buy the newspaper for $0.25, and then they would go out and they would sell it on the street for $1, and they would keep the 75-cent spread. And so I think it was 92, he started doing that and helping. And so his agenda was always to combat homelessness, not through panhandling, but through giving economic benefits, right? Helping them to become employable, giving them skills. And so what he saw was that his homeless men and women workforce, they were becoming EMTs. They were becoming stable home renters. They were going back getting education. And so what he felt was, as he was transitioning from that flipping lifestyle to the buy and hold, was one, that the cash on cash returns were fantastic. I mean, let's be honest, right? Economically speaking, he felt that if we could do this and we could do it well, the money would be there. Like, we would get better returns in these communities than we could get anywhere else. And two, the social return was going to be far and away anything that we could get anywhere else, And so that became the plan. And then as we start to study, we started to say, okay, everybody starts to look and they hear this word gentrification and they get gentrification. But the reality is, the only thing about gentrification that is bad is displacement, right? Is the actual exodus of families from their homes and from their community, right? And so what I did was I started looking at this, and I started saying to him and to our investors and people that we work with, is like, the only way that you can appreciate a neighborhood without causing displacement is to bring that community with you, right? So we have to raise the value of the area, because we're doing everybody a favor, right? If I could get you in a house and I could double the value of your house without changing your cost of living, that's good for you, right? And so if you bought a house, if Barry came in and moved in and bought a house in Woodlawn for $100,000, and then in 3 years it was worth $300,000, you didn't have to get a new mortgage to pay, you're happy. That's now equity, right? Your property taxes might go up a little bit. So then you got to say, okay, so how do I offset the cost of living increase, the property tax increase, things like that, because now the land is deemed more valuable. Well, I start to give skills out there and start to put opportunities out there for the people who live in this community, for them to be able to make more money, right? So now, instead of hiring you to work at this, job for minimum wage, you now can become a property manager and you can make more money. So now you can afford to stay. So now things are changing and you can afford to be here, And so that became our plan. It's like, how can we create change and stability in these communities, raise the value for the people who deserve the value to be raised, but not leave behind the people who are helpable, and make sure that they can make enough money to stay, And so that was the plan. And so then so we said, well, we got to hire from the community. So we got to hire these people from the community. We got to get them into our training. We got to partner with our banking institutions to make sure that they can get in and get the training that they need. And then we got to employ them, and we got to get them out here on the streets. We got to get them working. And so that's what we did. And whether we own a moving company as well, so whether it's employing them in our moving company or our property management or our maintenance arm or whatever, or hiring the local welder to come in and do our fence repairs, or the local electrician to come in and do, whatever electrical work, that's what we try to do. And we try to make sure that while we're bettering the community, we're bettering the people and the citizens in the community. Now, the reality is, can we save everybody? No. Is there going to be some displacement? Absolutely. You can't, at the end of the day, it is what it is, but if I can keep that electrician in his home, and I can keep that plumber in his home, and I can keep that property manager in their home, and I can do my part in that regard to try to keep all these people who grew up in these communities and have been here their whole lives, and they can stay in their home, then, I mean, that's all that I can do, and that's all that we can do, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think this stuff is fascinating. It's really interesting. I've never heard anyone talk about it like this and kind of do what you guys are doing. And so I guess you guys kind of go in and change neighborhoods, right? You kind of improve neighborhoods, not just a property. Seems like you guys go in and change the neighborhoods for the better.
I mean, that's the plan. I mean, we're still small in the Chicago market. I mean, with 150 units in ownership, we're still very small players. But our goal is to get in there, the 10,000, 12,000 unit range, and really have true impact on these communities. Be able to employ full-on staffs of managers and office staff and admins, and and really create that level of impact. Yeah, I mean that's our goal.
Yeah, that's cool. And it seems like you guys have a big why, right? People always talk about the why and the reason you're doing it, right? Like,
Sure.
yes, there's financial gain. Yes, you can profit you guys up, but doing good for the community and doing good for these people seems like that's higher on the list, if anything, and it's mutual benefit. Again, talking about that mutual benefit, that win-win for everyone. Everyone benefits, right? People for the most part.
It's the double bottom line that they talk about, right? It's creating that win-win scenario for the community as well as for your investors, right? Because at the end of the day, we have investors who invest with us, so we have an obligation to make sure that we do the very best that we can so that we can protect and get them the returns that they need, and all of that stuff, But at the same time, we don't believe that we have to sacrifice and squeeze and bleed the neighborhood in order to get the returns that we need. We do what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, right? So there is no mandate that forces us to keep our rental prices where they're at. There's nothing that says, I'm not a HUD deal that is requiring me to stay within 80% of AMI. There's nothing. So we just do it because we run our numbers to the point where, okay, I can keep this affordable while yielding the returns that I need to return, and get my rehab and all my other stuff done. I don't need to charge, even though, can I charge? Like, am I in an area where I could charge $1,100 or $1,000 a month for a one bedroom? Sure I am, But if I can hit my returns at $850 or $900 a month, why not just do that? And I can still yield and everything like that. And am I leaving $100 on the table? Sure. Is a pure capitalist out there going to be like, oh my God, absolutely. But for us, again, right, by being able to keep that senior citizen on a fixed income in her apartment, because her fixed income doesn't let her go up to $1,000, that's more important to us, right? And so that's kind of why, with what we do, we probably do leave money on the table, but that's why it's even more for me. Like, my biggest job of what I do is I vet all of our deals. I've probably walked 10,000 units across Chicago since I've started doing this. And so I have to buy it right? Everything for us is a strict, we have to be able to buy it right. We have to be able to rehab it right. We have to fit all of this stuff in order for us to acquire a property. Because again, right, our return that we want to deliver, our cash on cash return that we want to deliver to our investors is extremely important to us. So if Barry is my investor and I can get him 11% while also keeping Miss Smith in her apartment, who loses, right? Is Barry going to be mad that I didn't give him 13%? No, he's going to be happy that I got him 11% because otherwise he was going to be in the stock market not possibly doing 8% if the stock market is stable, but he's going to be worried about his money every single day, whereas now he's getting a check every quarter or every 6 months or whatever that he wants, looking at 11, possibly 12%. And he's not worried about nothing because I'm also showing him like, hey, this building just sold down the street from us for $20,000 more a unit than what we got in ours. Barry, we gonna make money when we sell this thing. You know what I'm saying? And so everybody's happy, And so, and that's the reality. It's like our 60-unit building, for example, we're into it, I think, at $67,000, $68,000 a unit. A building 4 blocks away from us sold last winter at 87. It was like $87,000 to $92,000 a unit, somewhere in that range. So, that's real, right? So after my rehab, I'm gonna only be $67,000, $68,000 a unit in mine. We can go and put it on the market if we wanted to tomorrow after we finish our rehab and get the building rented up. The day after, I can put it on the market automatically at $87,000 a unit and sell it that day, for, $10,000, $20,000 more than what we bought it for, and on 60 units, that's a pretty chunk of change, and so imagine what it's going to be in 5 or 10 years. We might be able to sell it for $100,000 a unit in 10 years, and it's an opportunity deal. So we actually used opportunity zone. It's an opportunity zone. We use the opportunity fund to do the deal. And so our investor, on top of the cash flow that he's going to get on it, he's getting all of the tax benefits of the opportunity fund. His return on this deal is going to be stupid. And I still don't have to charge market rate for rent.
That's great. That's great. Talk a little bit about Opportunity Zone. What is, what we've all heard about it, I'm sure, for people who haven't. Maybe break it down for people who haven't, and then actually maybe if you can go in a little bit more detail about actually how it works.
Sure. So ultimately, in the Tax and Jobs Act that came out in 2018, in the 2017, whatever that was. Just pretty much stipulated capital gains, right? So you could take capital gains out of the market, put it into, create an opportunity fund, and use it to invest in these identified opportunity zones across the country. Now, Chicago has 135 opportunity zones. I think there was over 8,800 of them identified across the country. And really what it is it's a tax shelter for people with capital gains. And so what it is you can take your capital gains, and if you leave it in this opportunity fund, invest it in an opportunity zone for 5 years, you can get a 5% basis step down on your tax, or 10% basis step down on your taxes, and then that you owe on that money, right? So, for example, if you invested $1 million in 5 years, you only have to pay taxes on 900,000 of it, right? And then if you leave it in for 7 years, you get another 5%. So now you're at 15% basis step down. So now after 7 years, you only got to pay taxes on 850,000 of that $1 million, right? So you end up saving money just organically right there, and you get the tax deferral. So you don't even have to pay the taxes on money until the 7th year. And then if you leave it in the fund for 10 years or longer, every dollar you make on the sale of the asset is tax-free, right? So for example, if I invest $1 million, I leave it in there, of course I'm cash flowing, whatever. And then in 10 years, I turn around and I sell the property for $2 million, right? So I know, right, let's say, we all know 10% appreciation is insane, right? But let's just say, for the sake of our argument, we said, well, that $1 million that I gained on the sale of the asset is 100% tax-free, right? And then my depreciations, hopefully, my depreciations would have reduced my tax burden on my annual cash flow. So I would have gotten to a point where my cash flow and my appreciated value come out relatively tax-free, and I end up only paying taxes on the initial investment minus 15%, right? So for an investor, like, even if you don't make any money cash flow, the deal makes sense, So if you can find a deal, it can make sense. Now, but the stipulations of opportunities on deals. So one, it's only capital gains, right? So you have to remove money so if you invested $1 million into the stock market and you pull out $800,000, well, you lost money. You have no capital gains. But if you pull out $2 million, then you have $1 million in capital gains, and you have your $1 million original investment, right? So that original investment you can't use, right? So you put that and you take that and you reinvest it. But you take this $1 million and you say, I don't want to pay my cap gains on this. I want to put it somewhere else. And so you take that cap gains of $1 million, you say, okay, I'm going to qualify this as an opportunity. I'm going to create an LLC. It's going to be my opportunity fund. I'm going to put my $1 million in here, and then I'm going to use this to invest in real estate. Okay, so now you've identified this money. Now the government says that you have to invest in a property, that you have to do, and I don't know if it's changed recently. I know that there was some chatter about it changing, but the last that I saw was a dollar for dollar purchase to rehab value, right? So if you bought a property for $1 million, you have to do $1 million in rehab for it to qualify, okay? Unless the property had been vacant for over a year, then that is an automatic qualifier, and vacant land is an automatic qualifier. So if you're doing new development, it's an automatic qualifier if it's within a zone. So we don't do new development. We only do rehab. So our property that we bought for $1.9 million, $1.925 million, and we're doing $2 million in development on it. So we're actually a little bit more rehab than we bought it for. So it qualified. And it's asset value, right? So you deduct the value of the land from the calculation. So even though we paid 1.9 for it, if the land is valued at 200, 300,000, so I only had to spend about 1.6 on the rehab. So we were good by a long shot. And so our investor just has to leave the money in there. So now, but what we could do is I could turn around and sell it in 5 years, reposition the money. My investor still maintains the benefit of his opportunity money as long as he doesn't take any money out, right? So if we turn around and sold it in 5 years, if he kept whatever he made in the fund and we took all of that pile of money and we reinvested it into a bigger project or another project that fit the same stipulations, he could carry on his opportunity fund investing within the fund, you know, and wouldn't have any tax implications at all. And so, I mean, for that, that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. And so you just got to find, I mean, ultimately you just find a rental property in your area that needs work. And as long as it's in an opportunity zone, you go, you buy it. And it has to be equity, right? So that's really the other thing. It has to be equity. It has to be able to be repaid. And you also, this is not for perpetualness. So like the opportunity zone stuff is slated to end, I think, oh God, that really tested my mind. I think it's 2056. Is when it's a hard out. It's when the hard end to it all. And so this is not something that is going to be generational. And so you have to have an exit strategy. You know, you have to have a way to get out of the deal and get everybody their money back, right? So it is equity. You know, and so you know, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We were one of the first opportunity fund deals to break ground in Chicago. In fact, I don't know of another one that has actually, I know there was like plans for 3 or 4 of them, but I don't know of any of them that actually have broken ground yet. While all this stuff was going, I mean, we sat down with Goldman Sachs, we sat down with Associated Bank, you know, and all of these people all wanted to do these two. I mean, Goldman Sachs said that they're willing to do up to $50 million if they want to be part of the stack. So they don't want to be in a small stuff like what we're doing. They wanted a $200 million new development project somewhere that was shovel ready, you know. And I told them all the same. It's like, look, you can do more. You know, I can deliver you the returns. You know, but so ultimately, I think that with the way that most people have been attacking the opportunity zones and opportunity funds has not been very good. You know, you see your Jared Kushner's and your big time developers and Anthony Scaramucci's and all these people are starting their funds, but all they want to do is that one-time drop. They want to do that one-time $200 million drop into a new development. You know, like you were talking about those 400 unit buildings, 500 unit apartment buildings and things like that. You know, but that's not what these communities need. You know, these communities that were identified for this investment, they don't need a $200 million multiplex. You know, they need somebody to come in and fix up the dilapidated buildings and stabilize the buildings that already exist. Some of them may need, you know, some of that infrastructure, you know, some you know, shopping malls and things like that and things like that. But for the most part, you know, they need you to come in and rebuild the infrastructure of the communities that already exist. And I think that that's where a lot of the big money is missing the mark right now. Because there are plenty of 10-unit buildings that would qualify, you know, where you could still get to 200 units, you know, if you just were smart about how you were putting your money. But, you know, Goldman Sachs told me straight up, it costs too much money for us to manage 20 10-unit buildings. Just for on our side, the asset manager aspect of what we do, there's no value there for us.
Yeah, they look at things a little differently, I think. They have,
yeah.
You know,
yeah. So,
but it's an interesting, you know, especially for what you guys do, an opportunity zone is almost perfect for your guys' kind of business model, really, like with that. You mentioned a few times that you have investors. How are you guys finding investors? I mean, is it harder to pitch? I know you guys are getting higher returns, but is it sometimes harder to pitch, you know, lower income housing to investors?
Yeah. So ironically enough, we had a husband and wife investor couple, and that's been our investors. And then they separated, and so now they're our investors.
So you went from one investor to two investors,
right? So, but my dad knew them from his Streetwise days. They were donors when he was working nonprofit, and then he sold them on this concept. And so we have not, until recently, really pushed after new money. We pitch them, and if they say yes, we're good, and if they say no, we're bad. And so they've been, and then they've been really happy with what we've done. And recently, I've started reaching out to hedge funds and money managers and things like that to try to sell it. But yeah, I mean, especially when you got, I was talking to this group in Texas, and I'm competing against CNN, right? Like I'm competing against Fox News, where all they show is the violence going on in the city, and all they show are the protests, and all they show are the vandalism and things like that, which are happening. I mean, I'm not, they wouldn't have a story if they weren't happening. But the reality is there's plenty of things that are out here that aren't impacted by that, directly impacted by that. And so the difference is you got to know where you got to know where to be and where not to be, and so, but yeah, I mean, it definitely overcoming the communities and overcoming the stigmas that are created by the media make it very difficult, because I do think people are concerned, and then even now, right? Like we have probably more non-paying tenants than most people have, right? Because of the section of people that we service, right? These people were already the bottom rung of most employers' payroll scale, so they were the easiest to furlough, and things like that. And so, we've probably been during the pandemic somewhere between 75 and 80% rent collected. And we have some people, like we have a building right now over on the west side where our tenants are paying, we got some tenants who pay $50, and then they'll pay $200, and then they'll pay $25, and they're just trying to get ahead, and they're just trying to stay caught up. And so it makes that part is difficult. The pandemic has been a new one for us in dealing with the unemployment and things like that. It has been difficult. And then on top of that, we have to deal with, again, the media turning around and calling and landlords scum because we're trying to collect our rent during the pandemic, and so that part is tough. But the reality is, and I had this conversation not too long ago, majority of landowners in Chicago, majority of multifamily holders in Chicago are mom and pops, right? They're not the money bag from Monopoly guy who is sitting there running around and just has money flying out of his pockets. We're not, the Robert Kiyosaki's and the Donald Trumps of the world that holds $1 billion worth of real estate. Majority of people might have 10, 15, 20 units. Somebody might have a single 12-unit building that they got passed down from their parents, so, when you don't get your rent, and you think that we're all just these, high net worth millionaires, that's not the case, because the reality is, of that dollar, every dollar you collect, only 39% goes to your mortgage, right? Only a small, I won't say a small portion, but only that portion of it. The other 61% of it goes towards your payroll, maintaining the building, taking care of the land, taking care of the properties, and then you might have a, maybe 2 or 3% margin at the end of the day, on every dollar that you make on that is paid in rent, right? So when everybody's like, well, you guys are going to get, furloughs and or you're going to get deferments on your mortgage and things like that. Well, yeah, but that's only a small part of what your rent covers, right? Do you like having water? Because your rent covers that. Do you like having lights in the hallways? Because your rent covers that. And so what about the fact that you don't have to worry about going out and touching COVID-infested handrails because we're out there cleaning your handrails every other day? Do you like that? Because your rent goes to paying those guys to making sure that they can come in and you don't have 12 feet of grass in front of your door, and having rats all over the place because we're sending in pest control and the garbage is coming to get picked up. You like all of that stuff, so look, if I furlough my rent, I'll cut off that 39% and you can still pay me the 61%, like whatever, But that's the thing that the media doesn't actually talk about. And we get, and it's put back on us like, oh, you guys can cover that. Well, some of us can, but coming out of this, in these eviction moratoriums, I don't know if you guys are struggling with the moratoriums out in Las Vegas, but the eviction moratorium is killing people here in Chicago.
Yeah. Man, I could not agree with you more. Like, one of the biggest things I think that's come out of this friggin' pandemic is the misrepresentation of landlords, right? Just like you said there, majority of them are mom and pops. They're just people trying to make a better living for themselves. And that's just, it's not part of the American dream, right? It's like trying to create this life for yourself. It's the American dream of starting with nothing and creating this amazing life. That's kind of what most real estate investors are. They're not Donald Trump. They're not, like you said, Robert Kiyosaki, right? They don't have billions of dollars, and they're not developers is making these high-rise buildings, right? They're people who have a 10 they might not even have that. They may have one single or two single-family homes.
Yeah.
That almost every penny that they have is going into that property. They might make a little bit of cash flow, but it's just enough to keep them afloat. And if anything breaks, the cash flow is gone for a few years. Now, throw in on top of that the eviction moratorium, where they can evict people who will then decide to take advantage, whether they can pay rent. There's a lot of people taking advantage. They know that they don't have to pay rent if they've lost their job or whatever. And it's unfortunate, but I don't see why landlords have to be the one that bears the pain of all this, right? Why do we have to? We went out there and took a risk, right? And tried it like you guys are doing. You guys are making these communities better. You're giving people a better place to live. You're giving people jobs, right? You're making people feel safe. You're not out there just being a scum landlord. You're not out there being a slumlord, right? You're not just making people, ripping them off for every penny that you can get. You guys, you talked about there that you're actually leaving money on the table for these people to stay in their homes and to have a place that they can afford to live. But yet, you have the rent strike thing going on everywhere, right? To pay rent. It's like, how can you not pay rent? It's like you agreed, you signed a contract. You can't go into Lowe's and just pick up out anything you want because you didn't feel like paying for it, right? So why is it the same with rent, right? We're here, we take risks, we put in the work, and we do things for the better good for the most part, right? Of the community, and and because of that, we get left in the dust. We're the ones that get left behind. It's insane. And another thing is, like, the reason the tax laws are so favorable to real estate investors is because the government don't want to be involved in trying to find housing for people, right? They give us beneficial tax laws so that we are incentivized to go invest in real estate because that's what they want. But then now all of a sudden, because of this pandemic, we're money grabbing thieves or whatever it is. It's insanity.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, if you really want to see how the government did with running housing, right? We've all know what the projects are. Yeah. Right? We have data that shows what it's like when the government owns and runs buildings. It's not good, right? Cabrini Green was popular in Chicago. There's several projects out in New York. I'm sure there's several projects out in Los Angeles where everybody can talk about what it was like when this government owned and ran their housing. Not good. They were crap. They were rat infested. They were undermanaged. They were not good at it. So we have data showing what it was like when the government ran housing and provided housing. They didn't do a good job, which is exactly why they incentivized people to provide housing, is because they don't want to do it and it's a necessity, right? People need somewhere to live, but they understand that's not something that they do well. So, they need people to want to do it, because of the risks associated to it. And that's the bottom line, so we know, look, if you really think that government subsidized housing facilities is the way you want to go, I wish I could move you into some of the projects that used to be here. I guarantee you wouldn't last 24 hours. You would be out of there in a heartbeat. So all these people talking about rent strikes and all these people talking about free housing, and I've gotten to, when one of my friends in college, he's a nonprofit guy, and he's like, why should we have to pay for housing? It's like, because that's how it's said, that is what it is, right? Like, I mean, I understand it is a necessity, right? But you pay for food, food is a necessity. You go out and you buy food, you pay the farmers for the food. Why wouldn't you pay a housing provider for providing you a house to live? And if you don't like it and you don't think it's right, then go buy your house with 100% cash, and then you don't have to, you know. But other than that, take care of your community. Take care of the people who are taking care of you. And that means that, you know, when you're getting these unemployment benefits, take care of your landlord. Make sure that he has the means and the resources to take care of your property. You know, you're going to call him if that ceiling falls in on your head. And if you call you and say, well, you know, I'm sorry you didn't pay your rent, so I don't have the money to fix it, you're going to be real upset. You know? Or, hey, I don't have my water's not working. What's going on? Well, you know, nobody paid their rent, so I couldn't pay the water bill. You know, like, I can't believe it. Well, pay your bills. Like, be an adult. You know, like this is what it is to be an adult, right? We go to work, we get paid, we pay our bills, and if we don't, we figure it out, right? You got to figure it out how to get it done. You got unemployment. I have, like, we're facing a labor shortage in Chicago as far as our trades are concerned. Like, I just had this conversation with my carpenter. He's having a hard time finding guys that want to work because they're getting paid almost as much as they were getting paid per week on unemployment as they were when they were working with that benefit that they were getting, you know, and now they're getting ready to enact something else. I think $2.2 trillion was just approved to come back in and, you know, so they're going to re-up it. So now you can't sit there and tell me that you're making 80 to 90% of what you were making before. Some people making more on unemployment with that extra stipend that was in there, and you can't pay your rent. You know, like, you're not going to get any sympathy from me. Now, if you sit there and you tell me, like, hey, I wasn't on my job long enough, you know, so I don't get unemployment, you know, when all this happened, that's bad luck. We got you, you know, we got you. We're not, you know, we're here for you, you know, but you've been on your job for 10 years. Like, I have a lady who, she didn't even stop working. She just decided to stop paying her rent because there wasn't nothing we could do, you know. And so it's just, it's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, just like you said there as well, I'm glad you said that as well, is that we're not, if someone's in a real bind and if they're in genuine, you know, financial distress and they can't pay, and it's a case of they're going to be out in the street and they're going to have nowhere to live, okay, that's a completely different story. We're not talking about these people whatsoever, but the people that have been getting the unemployment, you know, people making, I don't know, like you said, twice what they're normally making, right, maybe in a week, right, and they still refuse to pay rents just because they know they can get away with. That's what we're talking about. People thinking that they don't have to pay rent just because they think landlords can afford, you know, to not receive that rent. That's what we're talking about. So in case, you know, you got to be careful what you say sometimes, right? People will misconstrue what you say. So yeah. Well, yeah, I'm glad we talked about it. We both got something off our chest, I feel like, right? It's like, okay,
I know.
Cool. Well, hey, I warned you before we started that this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, and I like to ask wrestling-themed questions.
Sure.
So the first, you said you came from a big wrestling household, right? You guys used to
used to love it when we were kids.
That's cool. It's cool. So this will be fun. So if you, every wrestler has a name. What would your name be if you had to choose one?
Okay, so when I was in college, you know, as a Black kid, there wasn't a whole lot of us playing volleyball at the next level. So one of my best friends in college, my nickname was the Token, right? So everywhere we went, I was the Token Black guy. So I think that would be my nickname. One tournament though, I messed up the spelling of it, and I spelled it Tocken. And he looked at me and goes, "What the hell is a Tocken?" I'm like, I don't. What is it? So that's what I would be, the Tocken.
Okay.
And, that would be my wrestling nickname.
So every wrestler has a special move. What would your special move be in real estate?
I do. So like I said, I'm one of my favorite things and things is deal finding. So I'm the analyst. I like to go out. I like to walk properties. I like to put the numbers together, run the performance, and see exactly how this deal is going to work out over the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So I would say, like, my special move would be analyzing properties.
What are you doing differently now to analyze properties as post-pandemic to pre-pandemic? Anything?
Not really. Mostly what I'm doing is understanding market conditions, right? Seeing how the pandemic is causing price per units to fluctuate as they're selling on the market, and then in trying to understand how that is going to impact our buying power, you know. And so, but to be honest with you, the market really hasn't shifted a whole lot. As far as the pandemic is concerned, prices are still staying pretty flat. You're not really seeing a whole lot of change in a lot of the markets. And so we're not really doing too much different. I just walked the building the other day, and it's the same. You're looking at the cost per unit based on what the after repair values are going to be. Is there any meat in the middle? Can we get this thing done? Get my construction guys out there, price out the rehab, and figure out what the purchase price. Yeah, I reverse engineer everything, right? So I start with ARV. So whatever the ARV of it is, minus construction, minus our margin equals my purchase price. And so I'm bringing my construction crew in on my first walkthrough. On my second walkthrough. So if I'll walk through it myself to see if I really like it, the very next walkthrough that I do before I put in a offer is with my heads of my trades, just to get a ballpark of where they're at. I've gotten to a point now where I can pretty much get pretty close, but I like to hammer it just because they see things that I don't see. And then they'll send me their numbers within a day or two. And so I'll have my construction numbers on the high end of where I think construction can be. And then I put my margin in there and I say, okay, well, this is how much I can have to offer it. And it's really not an emotional thing. Either you accept it or you don't, and if you don't, then we keep it moving.
How are you finding deals? Brokers or?
Yeah, I have a litany of brokers that send me stuff all the time. I'm on LoopNet often. So we have, I don't know if you're familiar with CoStar.
Yeah.
Okay, so loopnet.com, I'm always on there looking to see what deals are popping up. And then, like I said, I know majority of the commercial brokers in Chicago, and they all have me in their emailing. And so they'll send me deals as they come up. And then, I always look and talk to people, and got some wholesalers and things like that. So I try to keep my ear to the ground.
Yeah, you got a good deal flow, I'm sure. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate investing career?
Oh, man.
It might be.
Well, this project, I'll tell you what, the 60 unit that I'm on has been difficult. Dealing with the supply shortages due to the manufacturers being shut down due to the pandemic. The building that we're working on is 100% concrete, so there's no drywall in it. So the walls between the units are concrete and fire brick, and the ceilings are concrete and fire brick, and so everywhere we go, everything is just harder to do because we did new plumbing, we did new electrical, we upgraded the service, new windows, etc. So like drywall is easy, you just put it down, maybe restud or something. Like fire brick and cement is tough, because if you might not mean to touch this part of it, but you touch over here and then it starts to disintegrate. Now you got to touch over, and so it's just been extremely complicated. But I would say my biggest body slam though, it was doing property management on our Southside portfolio. We had a house in Englewood, and this was back when I did not like going into Englewood. So if I didn't make it there by 2:00, I wasn't going. And it was a single family house that we were renting out, and I hadn't gone in a couple of weeks, and it's the winter. And I go and I open up the door, and it's just humid and just gets hit with this big old ball of humidity. And I'm like, oh crap. And I open up and I see all of the ceilings had fallen in, the walls had fallen down. I go down to the basement. There's 2 feet of standing water in the basement. One of the water pipes had busted on the second floor, and who knows how long it had been running. And so I had to balance on like the foundation walls to turn off the main power, and I turned off, and the whole house ruined. And we had just, and the hard part about it was we had just rehabbed it from a tenant, so we just turned it so that we could rent it back out because we had just put in $5,000 or $7,000 to fix the house up for the next tenant. And here the ceilings are on the floor, the floors are all buckled up. Oh yeah, it was tragic. I thought my dad was gonna murder me. I was like, oh, my life is over. We're done. Let's, let's pour it all out. Let's go. I'm dead. And and he took it. He took it okay. He wasn't happy, but he took it okay. And but it was a big lesson on I need to make sure that I'm on my job. I need whatever my requirements are, whatever my responsibilities are. Whether, I need to be making sure that, so that was a big punch to the gut early on to make sure that I stay on task.
Did insurance cover that for you guys?
Fortunately, yes. But again, I was newly into it, so I didn't even think insurance. Now I can't think of insurance, but I'm sitting there thinking, I just cost my dad 50 grand. What am I gonna do? So, yeah, it was panic mode for real. Like I'm not going home today. Let me go get drugs going on,
Yes.
So,
You have to move into one of your apartments.
Oh man, it was. I was terrified, but insurance ended up covering it because it was an elbow up on the second floor that had broken, and so it wasn't actually due to neglect or negligence or anything like that. It just it was a worn elbow that ended up expanding, and then you're talking about a little crack, and it caused so much damage. So water we don't play with, but yeah. So that was probably the biggest body slam that I ever had.
That's a bad one. Was there a moment you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
I would say again, our 60-unit deal. By far was our largest deal. And looking at the amount of work that had to be done, looking at the investment. I was definitely ready to walk away. We didn't get the appraisal that we needed to get. And so, there was a lot of things at the very beginning where I was just like, okay, maybe that we're biting off more than what we can chew, I sat down and talked with my dad, and I talked with our investor, and we just kind of kept hashing at it. And I went and walked back through the building and just saw the potential in the building. I called the broker friend of mine to try to figure out what was going on in the area to make sure that my numbers, it just became rehashing everything, going back through making sure that what I believed to be true was true about the area, about the building, about the potential, and then it just, at that point, it was just a leap of faith. Yeah,
that's cool. So what's next for you guys? What's in the future for you guys?
I hope more of the same. So, I hope that, my hope is that we're able to raise some legitimate capital to really be able to move forward. I want to try to get us to 1,000 units, and then also 1,000 units under management. And so, finding people who want to come into Chicago, who want to get into these areas, who want to do more than just get a return on investment, and are looking for somebody that is going to be a partner with them that they can trust with their money, so that we can get in and really, because the reality is there's a lot of hot investments going on right now that can yield social impact and economic impact. And so we just, want to try to get a large piece of that pie.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. It's been really interesting. I think it's just such a cool story to me, like about how, for one, as you talked about, saying bettering these properties out and improving people's lives, giving people jobs, but also at the same time getting a return, right? Isn't that what it's all about? It's about both, right? It's not just about one or the other, right? I always get great satisfaction in turning this into beautiful units, and then knowing that someone has a great place to live, like they're getting an affordable, great place to live, and at the same time I'm benefiting from it, right? Getting financial gain, but it's both. And I think most landlords fit into that category as well. They're not just pure financial gain. They want to make something nice. They want to give people a nice place to live, and they want to make some profit from it. So I think that's great. We both got on a soapbox for about 5 minutes, which was fun too. that was good.
I know, that's right.
But before I go, where can people find you and find out more about you? Maybe they might be, looking to invest in one of your deal, or maybe they just want to have a conversation.
Sure. My email is Corey, corey.a.oliver@gmail.com. That's my personal email. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Shoot me an email. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm a little bit harder to find on Facebook. And then our management company is called Strengthen Management. So we're on Facebook, and our website is, www.simpropertychicago, I think. Hold on, let me see. You're gonna make me have to look it up because I don't remember. Hold on, I got a business card.
Okay.
Yeah, like I know this is terrible, right? I should know this stuff. Hold on.
You're too busy looking at deals, man. That's what it is.
God, I didn't even put it on. I don't know. Just email me. Look, just email me. I'll get you everything else.
I'll get you to send it to me afterwards, and I'll put it in the description below so people.
That'll work. Yeah. So, but I mean, I'm about as I'm here for anybody. If you need help, if you got any questions, concerns, or anything like that, if I can be of assistance, shoot me an email. Let's figure it out.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Corey. That's been really a really interesting talk. Like, it's just I love your business model. I love what you guys are doing, and you're a great guy to talk to. It was a really fun conversation as well, right? Because it's one thing to have to talk about real estate, but to have fun with it as well. So I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Well, definitely. Thanks for having me again, and thanks for thinking about me for your show. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. You've been a great guest.
Thank you much. Well, you have a great one and enjoy the warm weather. But feel free to come to Chicago and get some of this cold.
I'm okay. I'll give it a pass.